The first light of dawn was breaking when it happened. A quiet moment most of the world slept through, but for her, it would change everything. She sat by the window, wrapped in that fragile hour between night and day, when the Quran's verses began to fill the air. Not through some miraculous sign, not with thunder or lightning, but in the gentle cadence of a morning prayer, drifting through her open window. And in that ordinary moment, something extraordinary occurred. A heart that had long been closed to faith suddenly opened. She had spent years believing religion was for the weak, that God was a crutch for those who couldn't face life's harsh realities. Her skepticism wasn't born from arrogance, but from pain. Too many unanswered prayers, too much suffering in the world she'd witnessed firsthand. She had built her life on certainty, on what could be seen and measured and proven. Yet here, in the haunting beauty of those pre-dawn verses, all her certainties began to unravel. What was this feeling stirring in her chest? Why did these ancient words, in a language she didn't even understand, resonate so deeply in her soul? There's a power in the Quran that transcends translation. It's in the rhythm that mirrors the heartbeat, in the melody that seems to bypass the mind and speak directly to the spirit. That morning, as the recitation washed over her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a connection to something greater than herself. Not the distant, judgmental God she'd rejected, but a presence so close it seemed to breathe with her in the space between each word. The verses weren't just sounds, they were keys turning in locks she didn't know existed within her. What makes this moment so profound isn't just the conversion of a skeptic, but the method of her awakening. No dramatic intervention, no burning bush, just the unadorned truth of the Quran at the most sacred hour of prayer. Fajr, when the world is still and the veil between heaven and earth feels thinnest. There's divine wisdom in this timing. In the quiet before the chaos of day, when hearts are most receptive, the Quran found its way to a woman who thought herself beyond reach. This is the miracle that repeats every morning across the globe, not with fanfare, but in countless private moments of connection and realization. Her story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth: how often we judge what we don't understand, how quick we are to dismiss experiences that don't fit our worldview. Here was a woman of intellect and accomplishment, not some impressionable mind, easily swayed by emotion. Yet when confronted with the Quran's undeniable power, she had the courage to admit she might have been wrong all along. There's profound humility in that admission, a lesson for all of us who cling stubbornly to our positions while truth whispers around us. This transformation didn't happen in a mosque or during some grand religious event. It happened in the quiet of her home, in that vulnerable hour when defenses are down and hearts are open. There's a message here about where and how truth finds us, not always where we expect, not always how we imagine. The Quran didn't come to her with arguments to win a debate, but with a beauty that disarmed her skepticism. Sometimes the deepest truths aren't understood through logic alone, but felt in the spaces between words, in the silence after a verse ends. What if we all approach truth with this openness? What if, like her, we allowed ourselves to be moved by what we don't fully comprehend? Her journey reminds us that faith isn't the opposite of reason, but what happens when reason meets something beyond its limits. That morning, as the first light touched her face and the last echoes of the prayer faded, she realized something fundamental. Some truths aren't meant to be analyzed, but experienced. And in that experience, a woman who didn't believe found something worth believing in. The quiet hour before dawn holds a sacred power that modern life has nearly forgotten. There's something mystical about this liminal space between night and day. when the world hasn't yet shaken off its dreams, but morning's first light begins to whisper promises of a new beginning. It's in this fragile, vulnerable moment that her transformation occurred, not by dramatic intervention, but through the gentle persistence of divine timing. The Quran describes Fajr as a time when prayers are specially witnessed, when the veil between earthly and spiritual realms grows thin enough for truths to pass through more easily. Consider how different this is from our usual expectations of spiritual awakening. We imagine burning bushes, blinding lights on the road to Damascus, undeniable miracles that force belief. But her story reveals a more profound truth, that God often speaks in whispers rather than shouts, meeting us not in spectacular displays, but in ordinary moments made extraordinary by their timing. The stillness of Fajr creates ideal conditions for revelation. The mind hasn't yet been cluttered with the day's concerns. The heart hasn't armored itself against the world. Night's darkness has softened our defenses, while the approaching light stirs unconscious yearning. This transformative timing works on multiple levels simultaneously. Physiologically, the pre-dawn hours find our brainwaves in a more receptive state between sleep and wakefulness. Psychologically, we're more open to new ideas before the ego fully armors itself for the day. Spiritually, Islamic tradition holds that divine mercy descends most abundantly during these final third of night hours. Her encounter with the Quran during Fajr wasn't random coincidence. It was the universe conspiring to deliver truth when she could best receive it. There's deep wisdom in this timing that challenges our modern addiction to instant gratification in spiritual matters. We want dramatic conversions and sudden enlightenment, but her story reminds us that true transformation respects the natural rhythms of human receptivity. The Quran found her not when she was seeking, but precisely when she was soft enough to be found. In that holy pause between breaths of the universe, when even a confirmed skeptic could hear eternity's echo in a few verses carried on the morning air. This is how grace often works, not by overwhelming the resistant mind, but by slipping past its defenses when the timing is perfect. She had built her entire worldview on the solid ground of reason and evidence. For years, she stood firmly in her conviction that belief was a crutch for the weak-minded, that the universe operated on cold, mechanical principles without divine intervention. Her skepticism wasn't superficial, it was hard-earned through life's disappointments and the apparent silence of heaven in the face of human suffering. She prided herself on needing proof, on trusting only what could be measured and quantified. Yet in one unguarded moment at dawn, as the melodic verses of the Quran washed over her, something extraordinary happened. The intellectual walls she had so carefully constructed began to tremble, not from the force of argument, but from an encounter with something beyond argument's reach. This collision between skepticism and revelation reveals a profound truth about human knowing. There are modes of understanding that transcend logical deduction, ways of knowing that speak directly to the heart while bypassing the mind's usual defenses. The Quran's recitation at Fajr didn't present her with philosophical proofs or scientific miracles to analyze. Instead, it resonated at a frequency her soul recognized before her intellect could protest. In that moment, she experienced what countless spiritual seekers have described throughout history, the shocking realization that the deepest truths aren't discovered through reason alone, but received when reason surrenders to a higher wisdom. Her mind, trained to dissect and doubt, found itself disarmed by beauty and presence rather than arguments. The verses didn't convince her, they transformed her. What makes this moment so powerful is the humility it requires. For a proud intellect to acknowledge that some truths can only be known through surrender represents one of life's most sacred thresholds. Her journey mirrors that of great thinkers throughout history who discovered that reason, while essential, has limits. Like Newton recognizing he was but a child picking up shells on the shore of a vast ocean of truth, she encountered something her skepticism couldn't explain away. An experience of the divine that didn't negate her intellect, but fulfilled it by introducing a new way of knowing. This keynote reminds us that spiritual awakening often begins not when we find answers to our questions, but when we discover that we've been asking the wrong questions all along. The Quran possesses a unique spiritual resonance that defies conventional explanation. Its rhythmic cadence and melodic flow create an almost physical vibration that seems to bypass intellectual barriers and speak directly to the human soul. When she heard those verses at Fajr, it wasn't the meaning of the words that first reached her. She didn't even understand Arabic. Rather, it was something in the very sound, the primal vibration of the recitation that stirred a deep, forgotten memory within her. The Quran describes itself as a healing for what is in the breasts, and in that pre-dawn moment, she experienced this truth firsthand. The recitation's tonal qualities, its careful modulation between strength and tenderness, created waves that resonated with her at a cellular level before her conscious mind could intervene with doubts or questions. This phenomenon points to a profound reality about divine communication. The Quran's linguistic miracle isn't merely in its content, but in its very form. The way its sounds interact with human consciousness regardless of language comprehension. Scholars have noted how its acoustic properties produce a state of focused receptivity, what modern science might call a flow state. The measured pauses at verse endings, the balanced repetition of phrases, the mathematical precision of its structure, all work together to create a portal of understanding that transcends translation. For her, this meant experiencing truth before understanding it, being moved before knowing why she was moved. The Quran didn't need to convince her intellect because it spoke directly to her fitra, that primordial, uncorrupted human nature that recognizes its creator instinctively. What makes this so revolutionary is its democratization of spiritual experience. You don't need theological training to feel the Quran's power. A child, a skeptic, even someone completely unfamiliar with Islam can be deeply affected by its recitation. This universal accessibility suggests divine wisdom in the very medium of revelation. While the mind may debate concepts, the heart recognizes truth when it hears it. Her transformation began not with an idea, but with a vibration. Not with a doctrine, but with a sound that awakens something dormant within her. This explains why millions who don't speak Arabic still find themselves weeping during Quran recitation. There are frequencies of truth that operate beyond language, and the Quran is uniquely designed to transmit them. In a world overrun with words and explanations, the Quran reminds us that some truths are better felt than formulated, better received than reasoned. There is something profoundly moving about how the divine pursues each human soul with perfect patience and precision. Her story reveals this sacred truth, that God meets us not through force or dramatic interventions, but through gentle, perfectly timed moments of connection. For years she had declared herself an unbeliever, convinced of life's meaninglessness. Yet the Creator continued drawing her with infinite compassion, not through thunderous commands from heaven, but through the quiet beauty of Quranic verses carried on the morning breeze at precisely her moment of greatest receptivity. This is the patient love of the divine, willing to wait lifetimes for that perfect intersection of circumstance and openness when a heart might finally hear truth's whisper. The miracle lies in the timing's perfection. That morning could have been any morning, yet it became the one when her defenses were down, her heart strangely soft, her ears unexpectedly open. The Quran describes how God is closer to us than our jugular vein. And here, we see that intimate closeness at work, knowing exactly when and how to reach her. While she thought herself alone in her unbelief, divine mercy had been orchestrating countless unseen circumstances to bring her to that windowsill at that exact hour. The right neighbor, the open window, the particular surah being recited, all converged in a moment of grace that respected her free will while creating perfect conditions for awakening. This is how God honors human dignity, not by overriding our journey, but by walking beside us until we're ready to see. Her experience mirrors the spiritual truth that divine pursuit adapts to each seeker. For some, it comes through intellectual inquiry. For others, through art or nature or human love. For her, it came through sound and timing, the Quran's recitation at the hour when her soul was most vulnerable to beauty. This reveals God's intimate knowledge of each heart's language and perfect willingness to speak it. The divine doesn't demand we come on prescribed paths, but meets us where we are, even if, like her, we're sitting in stubborn disbelief by a pre-dawn window. There's overwhelming comfort in realizing that no soul is ever abandoned, that the universe conspires with infinite patience to bring each wandering heart home in its own time and way. Her story isn't about sudden conversion, but about being finally ready to recognize the love that had been calling all along. What does it mean for a strong-willed person to finally admit, I was wrong? Her journey from staunch atheism to spiritual awakening reveals the extraordinary courage required to change one's deepest convictions. This wasn't a passive transformation where truth simply overwhelmed her. It was an active surrender, where she had to confront the limitations of her own certainty. For years, she had built her identity around skepticism, wearing her unbelief like armor against the mysteries of existence. That morning at Fajr, when the Quran's verses pierced through her defenses, she faced a moment of existential choice. Would she dismiss this profound experience to maintain her self-perceived? Or would she dare to question everything she thought she knew? True intellectual bravery isn't about stubbornly clinging to positions, but about having the humility to follow truth wherever it leads. Her transformation demonstrates the paradox of authentic strength, that real power lies not in never changing, but in having the courage to change when confronted with higher truth. This challenges our modern celebration of rigid consistency as a virtue. We admire people who stick to their guns, often mistaking stubbornness for integrity. But her story reminds us that there's greater nobility in saying, I've grown, I've learned, I was mistaken. The Quran itself praises those who reflect and return to truth, emphasizing tawbah, repentance, not as weakness, but as wisdom. Her moment of surrender wasn't defeat, it was victory. Victory over ego, over the fear of being perceived as inconsistent, over the human tendency to value being right more than finding truth. This is the hidden heroism in spiritual awakening, the quiet courage to rebuild one's worldview from the foundation up. Imagine the inner turmoil of that morning, the clash between her rational mind and her awakened heart, the disorientation of seeing reality through new eyes. Yet she embraced the uncertainty because something in those verses resonated at a level deeper than doubt. In a world where people cling to ideologies like life preservers, her willingness to release her atheism and float in the unknown represents one of the most courageous acts a human can undertake. The courage to believe. The most profound spiritual transformations often happen far from the spotlight, in the quiet corners of ordinary life where no one is watching. Her awakening didn't occur in a majestic mosque or during a grand religious gathering. but in the solitude of her own home as morning light crept through her window. This reveals a powerful truth about divine encounters. They need no audience, no ceremony, no intermediary. The sacred meets us in our most unguarded moments, when we're not performing faith for anyone but simply being our authentic selves. There's something beautifully subversive about how God bypassed all the official channels of religion to speak directly to her heart at that kitchen table, in her pajamas, with sleep still in her eyes. It reminds us that spirituality cannot be institutionalized or contained. It flows where it wills, often surprising us with its chosen vessels and unexpected timing. This private nature of her transformation challenges our spectacle-driven culture that equates visibility with validity. We've come to expect spiritual experiences to be dramatic, Instagram-worthy events complete with before and after testimonies. But her story shows how the deepest shifts happen internally, often before we can even articulate them to others. The moment of recognition between her soul and its creator needed no witnesses. It was complete in its sacred intimacy. This private quality makes it more authentic, not less. There were no social pressures, no performative aspects, just raw, unfiltered encounter with truth. Her window at Fajr became her personal Kaaba, her kitchen a sacred space more real than any cathedral. Yet this very privacy also carries a profound challenge to organized religion. It asks us, can we make space for these personal encounters that happen outside official structures? Can we honor the diversity of spiritual journeys that may not fit our templates? Her experience affirms that while community matters, ultimate truth speaks to each heart in its own language. The Quran came to her not through a preacher or a book, but through the living breath of its recitation at the perfect moment. This suggests that divine guidance adapts itself to our unique circumstances, meeting the scholar through intellectual proofs, the artist through beauty, the brokenhearted through comfort. Her story ultimately reminds us that while religions build houses for the spirit, God cannot be confined within walls. She finds us wherever we are, especially in those ordinary moments we never thought could become holy. As we reflect on this extraordinary journey, from doubt to certainty, from searching to finding, we are reminded that faith often arrives not with a roar, but with a whisper. In the quiet of Fajr, in the melody of the Quran, in the unguarded moments when the soul is softest, truth finds its way in. Her story is not just about one woman's awakening. It is a testament to the timeless power of divine connection, a reminder that no heart is ever too closed, no mind too skeptical for grace to enter. To every seeker listening today, your questions, your doubts, even your resistance are part of the journey. God meets us exactly where we are, not with condemnation, but with patience, not with force, but with an invitation written in the language of our own lives. Whether through the Quran's verses, the kindness of a stranger, or the stillness of dawn, the call is always there, waiting for us to listen. Thank you for allowing me to share this powerful story with you. Thank you for opening your hearts to its lessons. And most of all, thank you for remembering, no matter where you are in your own journey, that faith is not about having all the answers, but about recognizing the voice of truth when it finally speaks to you. May we all have the courage to listen. May we all find our Fajr moment. And may we never forget that the divine is always near, always guiding, always calling us home. Thank you.